to head up the NAACP in that area. And he was very instrumental in getting the information out to African Americans because he owned his own printing press. And so, you know, for him, life was just a terror because they would do the crosses in front of his home, and so I would learn about these stories through my relatives in disbelief, just thinking, is this really happening?
That they're living through this,
you know. And so, but truly, yes. And so, although I grew up in New Jersey, and my schools were integrated, and I lived in a very diverse community as a young kid, because as we grew older, they started to move out of our neighborhood, and it started becoming more of an African American neighborhood. But although I grew up this way, when I would go in the summers, because we went every summer to visit our grandparents, every summer I would just see a total different lifestyle than, you know, because they had chickens and they, so, I would go to the chicken coop and I'd feed the chickens, and, and so that was so different from going to the candy store on the corner in New Jersey. And so, but, so I think I had the best of both worlds, and I was able to appreciate, be able to appreciate, for one, education, because my in-laws, my grandparents were very, very instrumental. My aunt, who was an educator and became principal, she and I were like sisters. She was the youngest daughter in the family. And then when the part of the summer that we weren't in South Carolina, she would be in New Jersey.
Okay.
And so it was kind of like you had the best of both worlds in that. But you did learn a lot of the history as a result. I learned a lot of the history as a result of hearing my relatives speak of these harsh things that were going on.
This migration during the summer months. I had cousins in New Jersey, and we were so jealous of them because they would come and they had brand new clothes, and they would come down. And I don't know about you guys, but when somebody came with a New York tag, you knew these people, they've come from the north, and they were very, very much more well off. And my uncle would come, and he would give us $1 bill. And $1 bill, oh my God, we have $1 bill. So I always felt that he was rich. So when my sister, in order for me to go to college, my sister was a live-in maid, and she paid my board. And then I was a live-in maid in the summer to help with that whole thing. So when I got off the Greyhound bus to go to New Jersey, New York, she said, I've got to tell you something. And I said, what? She said, you know, we thought Uncle Henry was rich. And she said, he's not. And then I saw that although you didn't have this side of town with the signs and everything, that there's a different type of poverty. Because he lived in this railroad flat, in what's called the ghetto of New Jersey. And he made $100 a week, and we thought $100 a week. Oh my God! My parents made $45 between the two of them, and so these African Americans would migrate to New Jersey, New York, and they would come home. And during that short period of time, you felt that they were better than us because they talked proper.
That's what I would always hear.
Talk about talking, speaking proper, because you talk proper.
And they say down south.
So the Northerners would say down south.
It's interesting to hear you talk about going south. Of course, I don't know if it's considered Virginia, the deep south, but we went north. And talk about New Jersey, my dad's family lived in New Jersey. And my aunts and all, two of my aunts and my cousin put me through college. And my mom's sister, she did work in upstate New York, and they saw that I got whatever I needed, thank God for them. But in the summer, we all went
to New Jersey
to work.
Oh,
you could get a job.
I went to New Jersey, I stayed with my cousin in the summertime and got the job. And I remember saving my money, so when I came back home, I would be able to help to go to college. And I remember my cousin worked at a store, Klein's, S. Klein's. And all summer I would layaway clothes at S. Klein's and layaway clothes. And
So that's where you got that clothing.
I do know.
She's,
I got
she's
my
always,
clothes from my mom.
she loves clothes. She's always looking good.
Always.
So, but anyway, and I remember I made more money than my dad. My checks were larger than my dad's
Oh,
check.
yeah.
And I remember at the end of the summer, my mom kept telling me, save your money, save your money. So I had to get my clothes out of layaway. So I got all my clothes out and I saved my last check. And when I brought that home, they thought that was a lot of money. And it was my last check. And I showed my mother my check and she said, well, you make more money than your daddy made.
Wow.
When I went to Illinois to get a job, I just had to get out of the South. And so actually, I got on a Greyhound bus. Again, this is my director of speech pathology said, if you want to work in a hospital setting, you're going to have to probably work in an institutional setting. And I got on a Greyhound bus, left South Carolina State College, and rode on a Greyhound bus for 2 days or something to get to Dixon, Illinois. And I was so naive. Dixon, Illinois has very few black people. My husband was one of 2 black kids in his high school. So I get there and I go, where are all the black? There were no black people on the street. And I thought, oh my God. Well, we get to the hospital. I interview for this job. And he actually calls me back and said, you've gotten a job. My friend Patsy said, there's too many cornfields out here. I'm falling asleep during the interview because I don't want this job. Well, they called me and my advisor said, take the job, Lily. But again, I was the only African-American professional in the hospital at that particular time. And I came and lived on the grounds. Because see, in South Carolina, there were signs. I call it the land of no signs. So because there weren't signs, I thought I could live anywhere, I could do anything, that it wouldn't, you know. So they said, well, you can live on the ground, because these old ladies who worked on the wards would go to Chicago on the weekend, and they lived in this one dorm. And so it was me and pretty much all these white women, and I lived there. And I thought, well, I'll just get an apartment. And I think back, it was so stupid on my part. I hate to use that word, but I think back. So I would get up early on Saturday morning. Somebody from the church, the black church, came out. They would drive me looking for a place, and I would get to the door, and they would look out and say, oh, we just rented. And I thought, man, I got to get up earlier. So and so finally, all of a sudden, the pastor from the church came out to the hospital ground. My husband always said I picked up Lily at a mental institution, which was true because I was living on the ground. But he came out and said, you're not going to find housing. You need to realize that you're not going to find housing. And so I lived on that hospital ground for 1.5 years. And then the Department of Mental Health said, we will pay for your master's. You just have to agree to work in one of our mental health facilities. And I said, fine, but do I have to come back to Dixon? And so then I went to Northwestern, smarter this time though. You know, I went up, it was snow and ice in Illinois. I get up there, snow and ice, and they came to the door. I just rented. I just rented. And I thought, you can get me once, but you don't get me 2 times. So I called Northwestern, and at that time, there maybe I don't know exactly, maybe 30 African Americans were in at Northwestern, and I said, you have accepted me to graduate school. I cannot find housing, and I am not going to come because I did that for 2 weekends in snow and ice, and then they put me in this international house. So my whole graduate degree year experience at Northwestern was in this house of international families and all of this stuff. And I don't know, I think you guys would agree that you just get used, don't you just kind of get used?
You become, well, I never did get used to it. I remember I remember.
But you know where your place is.
Yeah, well, I don't know, but I would tell you, the swimming pool was at the end of my street, right, on Maple Street in Pulaski. And I used to go look through the fence at the kids swimming.
I used to do that too.
So I decided one day I'm going swimming too.
So what happened?
They told me I couldn't cut. My mother my mother jerked on me all the time because I was so defiant. I just could not stand being pushed in the back. I've always been a person, you know, on the bus. I mean, when on the bus when we were going to the city on the city bus, I would get sick and I would go on the front seat. And mother said, "Well, she gets sick." And the bus driver said, you can sit here until, if the bus fills up, you have to move back. So when somebody would come, I'd move a seat back.
One, right?
at a time.
And then a seat back, if it didn't fill up, I stayed there. And eventually, sometimes I'd be in the back of the bus. And my mother would say, okay, if she gets sick, she's going to throw up, you know. And I mean, I was just always a person that I wasn't, well, let me tell you, the swimming pool closed.
Because you went in it?
But when I started it, I got all the other kids involved and they closed the swimming pool.
Yeah, when we were South Carolina State, it was a bowling alley, and they had the sign up. And so we marched, and you know, you would go across the tracks to this church. And Dr. King said, I never marched with him, but he had given instructions that you go to jail, fill up the jails, and then when you get out, you go back. And so there was this bowling alley that they had a sign in front of. Now, I don't think any of us really wanted to bowl, but we wanted to have the right to go to that bowling alley. And so we marched, and they put us in jail. And they put us in this place called the Pink Castle. It was a beautiful Victorian edifice. But when you went inside, there was also, and I don't know about you guys, in South Carolina, if African American men get drunk on the weekends, they would throw them in jail. And they would land in jail. So they had been in this jail, and it was just, it was filthy. Yeah, and I was lucky because I got a table. So the word came out to South Carolina State, like, look, if you're lucky, you'll get to go to the penitentiary. Because if you go to the penitentiary, you're going to have your own cell. So the second time we went, they put us in the basement because they had so many people in there. And so we were like, maybe we're going to, and the next morning we heard that bus, that prison bus. And I'm not kidding, I told the story in 5th grade and pretty much an all-whites school. They went home and said, our assistant principal went to jail and penitentiary.